There is so much going on in our country right now with the second wave of COVID-19, the recent throne speech, and the changing of leadership in the Conservative Party, with Aaron O'Toole taking over from Andrew Scheer. To help sort out many of these big events happening in Canada today is John Robson, a columnist with the National Post, who joins me now from Ottawa. Welcome back to BCN, John.
Good to be here.
Now, John, let's start off talking about the throne speech. The Liberal Party is promising to create another 1 million jobs. They've also changed their minds about winding down the federal wage subsidy and to build a national childcare program. Now, is this a lot of just pomp and ceremony, a lot of talk, or do you think any of these things will actually happen?
Well, there's a third possibility, which is that they really intend for it to happen, but they don't know how to do it. And that one should never be ruled out. Obviously, Justin Trudeau and his colleagues are not hampered by doubt about their own marvelousness when it comes both to their morals and to their proficiency in designing and executing programs. And they say they're going to create 1 million jobs. They almost certainly think they will create 1 million jobs. Though I always wonder in these situations, well, if you knew how to do that, why didn't you do it 2-3 years ago? I mean, hey, great, you can create jobs. There are unemployed people. Let's do this. But they have a computer program that says if you do this, you'll have 1 million jobs, and then they'll do it, and then they'll run it through the computer program a second time and say, well, the computer says we created 1 million jobs. And you'll say, well, you actually just ran the same simulation twice. They're like, what? But they do think they can do this stuff. They think they can give us all childcare. They think they can conjure money out of thin air. So they really do mean it. And they don't spend a lot of time looking back at what they said in the past they were going to do and asking, gee, how did that turn out? Because that might prove discouraging, but they don't discourage easily. So I'm sure they intend to do it. And they think they can spend indefinitely. Low interest rates is not a problem. So we can keep handing out wage subsidies and so on. We can spend money on anything. During the summer, the Prime Minister was announcing $1 billion in spending a day or so, it felt. And there was never any sense that, okay, maybe we'll take a day off here because that's a lot of money. It was always, what else can we do for nothing but numbers in a ledger? I mean, what's a number in a ledger? That costs us nothing, whereas you get all this good stuff and then you vote for us. So yeah, I imagine they really will try and do a lot of this, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of results, but not because they didn't mean it.
The throne speech did nothing to address climate change, economic inequality, and systemic racism due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you think this maybe hurt the Liberals and Justin Trudeau?
I don't think so. You see, one of the problems is that all these guys really know how to do now, guys and gals, is give a campaign speech. Everything they give is fundamentally the stump speech. And so right now it's like, polls say people are worried about COVID, so you talk about COVID. It doesn't have any real impact on your agenda. The idea that the throne speech would be a sober way of alerting legislators to what the executive was going to be sending down the pipe so that they could give a reasonable, informed response to it is long gone. I'm actually having an interesting debate with people on Twitter over, there's a requirement in our Constitution that says the Commons cannot appropriate money for any purpose that is not first outlined by a message from the Governor General in that session. And some people are saying that just means every bill has to have a little note from the Governor General saying, please spend this money, which is so that private members' bills can't spend money. But I say the throne speech needs to contain fairly specific undertakings that the MPs can then think about. But it's all just sort of feel-good stuff. And if Trudeau wakes up tomorrow morning and decides he needs a Green New Deal, he'll put one through Parliament without regard for it having been in the throne speech. So it's really not very useful. It doesn't tell us what the government really thinks it should do. It just tells us what the government thinks we think it should do. And that makes it, there's a lot of sound and fury, but signifying far too little. I've seen British throne speeches from decades ago that were very dry and sober. The government will introduce a bill to regulate shipping, and it will do the following things. The government will, and quite dry and detailed, and then legislators could check this off as they went through the year, as opposed to, we will save you all from purple dragons, whatever they may be.
Now, the Conservatives were not impressed and were not willing to support the throne speech, John. Deputy Party Leader Candice Bergen says she wanted to see more help for Canadians who are falling through the cracks of the pandemic aid programs, including single moms, oil workers, and fishermen.
Yeah, so the Liberals say they're going to spend, billions of dollars on every person who they can find, and the Conservatives say, hey, here are some people you missed, spend more, which it makes you wonder why you have a Conservative Party. Why not just have another Liberal Party? Because it's astonishing the extent to which the Conservatives have bought into the government can do everything, and it has a magic money tree view. which again, I guess pollsters tell them this poll as well. Don't go telling people there's no free lunch. They won't like you. And there's nothing to be gained in this world or the next by telling people the truth and hoping that they're willing to meet you halfway. And again, you look at the press releases that come from any of the opposition parties, and you think to yourself, they wrote that ahead of time, didn't they? And then they just tweaked it a little and put it out. You don't have to ask yourself. What conservatives weren't going to say, hey, that was a great throne speech, nor are they going to say we have too much government. So they're going to complain that the handouts weren't tailored in quite the right way to quite the right people, including our constituents, who should have even more money from the public treasury. So that's politics for you these days.
Now let's talk about Canada's debt, which is around $1 trillion. You talk about that money tree here. We have a deficit of over $343 billion. With all of the spending going on, will we ever get back to black? Will we ever get the spending under control, John?
It doesn't seem very likely. I mean, as you may remember, last time we elected the Conservatives, they went and ran a $50 billion deficit and told us that deficits stimulate the economy, which they'd spent decades telling us they didn't. And then suddenly it was like, hey, we could buy votes with this. And then they lost the election. So I guess they weren't good at it. And they were gradually staggering back toward balance, but not in such a way that the structural problems, in my view, were addressed. That the government is in a bidding war, the political parties are, over the available votes in swing ridings. And the way you get votes is that you improve the sweet deal for voters, and you do that by loading it onto future generations. And now, of course, I mean, governments have had their foot to the floor on monetary policy since 2008, with, it seems to me, rather indifferent results, but they're hooked on low interest rates. They can't let them get back to a kind of market clearing rate. And this, of course, is good for borrowers and bad for lenders, which means, and then you wonder why Canada's savings rate is low. So, I mean, do you see the Trudeau Liberals suddenly deciding to cut $100 billion in spending? Do you see the provincial governments saying, you know what, the healthcare system is really unsustainable, we need to reform it? Healthcare is taking, 40+% of every provincial budget program spending, and it's just getting worse as the population ages. And as now, of course, the waiting lists have sort of doubled with the pandemic, and they were getting longer anyway. And nobody's willing to say we have too much government and therefore we should have less. That's the thing that nobody says, except me, and I'm regarded as kind of this irritating crank, but that's fine by me. But no, I mean, until you get a party that says we have too much government, and if you have too much government, you should have less government, then it's just inconceivable that we will get off this treadmill of spending ever more money in an attempt to attract votes from other parties that are also hurling the stuff out the window as fast as they can grab it with both hands and fling.
Do you think we'll see a federal election anytime soon here in Canada?
I rather doubt it. We obviously, the Liberals could lose the confidence of their coalition partners, but I don't think anybody really wants an election, especially during the pandemic. Nobody wants to be blamed for causing an election. And frankly, what is the NDP going to get more spending after an election than before? Is the Bloc going to have better leverage? Are the Conservatives ready to fight? Are the Liberals confident that they would win? It seems to me that none of them really want one. And we'll also have to watch what happens in BC, where John Horgan, they've got fixed election dates, and he signed a written pledge not to go early, and then he went early and said, well, haha, I feel like it. If he gets pummeled by voters for this, that will make it even less likely that we'll have one. But again, what's the point? How do we end up different? Never mind better. How are things really different if we have an election? I don't see the Liberals winning a smashing majority. I don't see the NDP winning more seats than they've got. I don't see the Tories winning. So it's just a lot of fuss, and they all go back to doing what they're already doing without having to try and stump the country when you're not allowed to shake a voter's hand because they'll think you tried to give them bubonic plague.
Aaron O'Toole has taken over the reins of the Conservative Party of Canada. Many argue that O'Toole is a red Tory, John, and that'll leave the Social Conservatives on the outside looking in. What are your thoughts?
It's certainly revealing. I mean, he ran against Peter MacKay saying, I'm true blue, Peter MacKay's a red Tory, and Peter MacKay is a red Tory, so he lost. And then O'Toole immediately comes out and says, oh, well, I'm into the progressive sexual agenda, and I really like unions, and I want managed trade, and I'm going to meet the Paris Accord. We went through a leadership race for that. It's like you're Justin Trudeau without the charisma, and we don't even like Justin Trudeau with the charisma. So why? What's it for? What does Aaron O'Toole stand for that is strikingly conservative? As I asked in a column recently, what is government currently doing that he would have it stop doing? Never mind, throw the social conservatives under the bus. Everybody hates them. Nobody knows those people. Forget about strengthening defense because we can't find the money. Let's just cling to the libertarian, the last tussock of dry ground for conservatives. where would you cut government? And if you can't even answer that, it seems to me that there's nothing good is suddenly going to happen. He's not suddenly in 3 months going to go, hey, guess what? I'm really right wing. What you see is what you get. He's getting advice from pollsters, and he wants to be liked by progressives. And to be liked by progressives, you have to insist that you too think conservatives are yucky people. What's he going to do for the unborn? Absolutely nothing. Not a thing.
Now, O'Toole launched his leadership campaign in Calgary. He seemed to have the support at that time from Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. John, do you think O'Toole will be a good advocate on behalf of the Western Canadian provinces?
I think he'll do an adequate job, probably rhetorically. But again, he's all in on global warming, right? He's into meeting the Paris targets, so that means you're into a carbon tax or something else. You can't destroy the fossil fuel industry and save it at the same time. You'll just wind up, bouncing the corpse or something. You've got to take on this climate change stuff on the basis of the science, or else you can't fight it on the policy. And O'Toole has this cunning plan where he will sidle left and somehow gain power by sneaking up on the Liberals, who he thinks are politically clueless, which is the last thing they are. And by which point he'll have compromised his agenda so much that what good could it possibly do? I mean, the Liberals already bought the pipeline. What more can you say at this point? It's just so odd to me that so many people go into politics as conservatives in order to make sure that no conservative option is ever actually presented to voters. And it looks as though Aaron O'Toole is another one of that crowd. Your tie's the wrong color, sir. It ought to be red. And that's just about all there is to it.
I guess maybe if O'Toole does become Prime Minister one day, he can always say, Bill C-48, C-69, they're gone. Now, John, will O'Toole taking over lead maybe to more support for Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada? And what about Separatist Party, Maverick Party, led by interim leader Jay Hill?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I obviously like Maxime Bernier's party for its libertarianism and its willingness to challenge taboos. I sometimes wonder if the people on the Twitter feed aren't 23 years old, which isn't the best idea you could possibly have. But it seems to me, I mean, one thing for poor Maxime Bernier, he couldn't possibly have less support. He's far too sensible and honest, it seems, to attract broad support, but he couldn't have less, so I think he'll have more. I don't know that Western separatism is yet a viable political force, but I do think, remember with Mulroney and the C-18 maintenance decision, which looked like such a small thing at the time and turned out to be huge. I think it's like these wildfires that we're having. There's a big fuel load out there, and a couple of things could ignite it. So I don't think that the people in central Canada, by and large, understand that, especially not, the so-called Laurentian elite. They don't grasp the degree to which under the surface Westerners feel disrespected in ways that are potentially quite dangerous. So I do worry that Western separatism might take flight instead of libertarianism. And I'm not against, I understand the West grievances, and I think they need to be met. I'm a proud Canadian, but I'm not, the word Canada doesn't justify anything. There are things that if Canada does it, Alberta and Saskatchewan would be right to go it alone. It's important to realize that that is true, and then make sure you don't go anywhere near that kind of thing. And if you look at how reputable Quebec separatism is, if you find out that somebody used to be a Quebec separatist, that they wanted Quebec out of Canada and said Canada was wretched, and now they're like, well, maybe Canada's actually pretty lucrative. Everybody's like, that's fine. Come to the cocktail party. Here, we'll appoint you to things. We'll love to have you as a candidate. And yet Western separatism is who let this leper into the room. And that's part of the problem. Either Quebec separatism ought to be a career killer and you never get invited to parties, or else Western separatism should be treated as, that's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about how to make sure it's not the right answer. And we really, we've done a couple of conferences out in Calgary and out in Alberta with the Economic Education Association of Alberta, where we've said, okay, well, what are the benefits? What are the costs? And the whole way we said, look, we're trying to understand rationally what the options are. What's on one side of the scale, what's on the other. It's not a magic bullet, but it's also not unthinkable. And the more people treat it as though it's just ridiculous, the more thinkable it's going to become. So if you love Canada, don't do it.
John, I often chat with one of our regular contributors, American journalist Lisa TORY, about the upcoming U.S. federal election in November. Let's get your thoughts as a Canadian journalist. Would Joe Biden and the Democrats winning be a good thing for Canada, or is it better if Donald Trump and the Republicans get reelected?
Wow. which side of my head would I like to be punched on hard? You know, I'm a real unfan of Donald Trump. Mind you, I also thought he couldn't win in 2016. I didn't think he'd get the nomination. So, you know, as a prognosticator, I'm a little bit suspicious. But I think that Joe Biden, I honestly believe that his health is not up to the job. I think you need to be asking yourself about Kamala Harris as president if the Democrats win, because I don't believe Biden, I literally don't think he's capable of doing the job. The Democrats are likely to win. The electoral map favors them and has for years, but the campaign's not going as well as it should. The ghost of Hillary Clinton's defeat hovers over them. And I got a very interesting interactive news story from NBC where they'd shown you a bunch of key demographics. Said this is how they split in partisan terms. This is how their voting turnout is. And you could slide them and see what it would take for Trump to win. And it takes a reasonably small change in Hispanic and Black American votes in the direction of the Republicans to make a Trump victory a real possibility. And one of the problems the Democrats have, and they've had this since the Nixon years, is their apparent sympathy for urban unrest is profoundly upsetting, including to people who live in poor neighborhoods. They may in principle think the Republicans aren't on their side, but boy, the violence in the streets really scares people, and rightly so. And the Democrats could certainly lose this election. But if Biden wins, well, you know, he's kind of a standard New Deal liberal. You know, you always want to say in partisan terms, this is the election of our lifetime, and he'd be the worst than the worst thing ever. People said that about Barack Obama. I thought he wasn't a very good president, but it wasn't. The world didn't end. Life went on. I think Biden would probably be kind of, you know, middle of the pack, left-leaning Democratic president, which I don't want, but I don't fear it. I fear a climate in which people like Donald Trump can get the nomination, and then the Democrats could nominate someone so much worse they lost the election. Like if you were given the task of losing the 2016 election to Donald Trump, you wouldn't know where to start. The polarization, the lack of sympathy, the gutter rhetoric, the explosions of rage and obscenity on Twitter, all of this stuff is coming from both sides. That's what scares me a lot more than the thought that we might get. We've somehow survived Donald Trump presidency. We could probably survive another term for Trump. We could survive a Biden presidency. But why must this be the choice? That's the question I wish voters would ask themselves. We can do better. Both parties can do better, and both parties should do better.
National Post columnist John Robson, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Always a pleasure.